Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Got it. So, family, let me tell you, this is an ideal situation. And what I mean by that is, see, every time I used to bring Jordan to these types of events, I never met an athletic trainer. See, when the first time I met an athletic trainer is when I got a phone call on June the 28th of 2018, and the phone call basically said, Mr. McNair, this is Officer such and such from the University of Maryland security or the police force that there's been an incident on the field. Jordan had a seizure. And that was June 28th of 2018. And 3 days later, which was May 28th. So June the 1st of 2018, less than 72 hours later, we were at the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center in Baltimore, Maryland, and the transplant doctor said, Mom and Dad, if we don't make a decision to get an organ transplant right now, Jordan will be dead within 12 hours. Jordan will be dead within 12 hours. 85% of his liver is necrosis. So for those of us that don't know what necrosis is, and I'm speaking in layman's terms, 85% of his liver was dead. See, you all got an opportunity to meet the athletic trainer. My questioning didn't start until I walked into the ER. See, because when the coaches were sitting at my kitchen table, in regards to recruitment, here's a guy that's 6'5", 320 pounds, 300 plus pounds, a size 16 shoe, a lineman that had the offers from everybody from University of Maryland to Alabama. Come play for us. I asked 2 questions. And the 2 questions I asked was, can you get some playing time? And I asked again something around mental health and substance abuse support. See, I didn't know what an athletic trainer was. See, when I walked into the ER, I asked the athletic trainer, hey, had this ever happened to either of you before? To which they both replied, no. I don't even know what I'm asking, what happened. I didn't know anything about a heat stroke. I didn't know anything about heat exhaustion. I basically thought that in the event of your child got overheated, you literally just got in the sun. You got the shade, you drank some water, and all will be right with the world. See, I never knew all of these things. So imagine losing a child. Show hands. How many of us love our children here? How many of us in here, show hands again, think our child is special? I was at a clinic yesterday in Baltimore, and a father was telling me that his 9-year-old was special. And he wanted the University of Maryland college coach to look at his kid. He's special, I'm telling you. I'm saying, Dad, he's 9. No, man, he knows the game. He knows the game. I'm like, Dad, he's 9. But it was funny, and I kept trying to Dad, he's only 9. I'm telling you, he knows plays. He knows the game. He knows this. Dad, he's 9. You got to get 10, then you got to get 11. This kid, let him do karate first. He may want to do something different in life. But that's what we think. We all think our children are special. Sometimes, unfortunately, we just don't know how special they are. You could have never told me 6 years ago that I'd be standing in front of a room full of other parents sharing our story. So you couldn't have told me 6 years ago that I would be an author or I'd be a lay legislative liaison. See, a lay legislative liaison is I know how to get legislation passed, however, I know how to explain it to regular everyday folks like us. So, basically, let's start the clicker. I told you, we went from a healthy kid Tuesday morning to an emergency liver transplant Friday morning. My son passed on June the 13th, 5 years ago, 2 weeks ago. That was the 5th year anniversary. Imagine the pain of losing a son, because as a father, how many fathers in the room, if it goes right, it's off. If it goes right, we pat ourselves on the back. But I guarantee you, if it goes wrong, it's a pain you never want to feel. Because it's our fault, because I kept asking myself, what did I miss? And see, what I missed was, when I started looking back in hindsight, was I always taught my son to be coachable. Coach say, run through that brick wall, run through that brick wall. See, I never taught my son to self-advocate. I told him to stand up for himself amongst his peers. Don't be a pushover, don't be afraid to fight, always be a leader, never be a follower amongst his peers. See, I never taught him to, if a coach makes you feel uncomfortable, say something. If you see a teammate that a coach is doing something to and you don't like it, speak up. I never taught him to listen to his body. When your body tells you to stop, stop. And mom and dad's in the room regardless of how much a coach yells and how much they scream and all of these different things. If you don't have it, you just don't have it. So student athletes in the room, you guys in the room, any coach will respect you coming to him and saying, Coach, I just don't have it today. Don't leave it all on the field, because I'm the first one to tell you, just because my son died, the game of football didn't stop. And I can give you a whole list of other kids that have passed along the way, whether it was soccer, whether it was track, whether it was baseball, whether it was lacrosse. Just because that kid may have passed, the game didn't stop. So young people in the room, listen to your bodies. So one of the things that I started to ask, I told you I asked 2 questions. Can he play and why aren't he playing? And I know every parent in the room, any medical professionals in the room? Got it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. That's 6 probably out of 100 people. I guarantee you, family, we only ask those 2 questions. Can they play and why aren't they playing? It's a lot more questions, a lot more important questions we should be asking prior to those 2. So the questions so one of the big things that we even got to as Jordan passed, and that grief, it was indescribable. And one of the main things, I know that if I didn't turn this pain into some type of passion, it would have consumed me personally. I probably wouldn't have been able to stand right here. I wouldn't have been able to do all the things. If I had waited maybe another week longer, it wouldn't have been this result. So we know what happened, right? Now, what have we done since this happened? And one of the things I started to look at in hindsight was whenever I would bring Jordan to these types of events, whether they were clinics, whether they were combines across the nation, the one consistent thing was all I ever did was probably what a lot of you did prior to this day. You just sit in the stands. You sit in the stands and you watch your kids participate. Or you drop them off, or you sit in the car. I always sat in the stands and watched my son participate. But the main thing was, if a piece of safety equipment had fell out the sky and hit me in my head, I would have never known what it was. I didn't know what a cold water tub looked like. I didn't know definitely didn't know what an AED machine was. So I didn't know any of these things. So some of you parents, we pass some information out today, and we talk about some of the 6 questions you should be asking. I didn't know anything about an emergency action plan. Anybody know what an emergency action plan? Show of hands in here. Beyond the ones that got our information. Don't worry, for those who didn't get it, we just get the perimeters. So we definitely have some handouts. So we're really big on emergency action plans. But let me tell you how we got to this point. In 2019, we thought it was all about cold water tubs. Jordan had a heat stroke, and if there had been a cold water tub on the field, basically he'd still be here today. So I walked into the Tractor Supply store and I saw this tub, 100-gallon tub. It was what they call feeding troughs. And there's this Rubbermaid tub, and I'm like, wow, okay, if they had that, Jordan would have been here. And we donated all these cold water tubs. We donated over 400 cold water tubs in the last 5 years, literally from Alaska to Florida. The kids kept dying. You can see I like to talk, so whenever I was going to schools and I would talk to football programs, and I'm talking to all the athletes in the schools, I started asking myself, what's going to stick once I leave? So then it was legislation. So we started getting laws passed, right? We got 4 laws passed in the state of Maryland, from the AAU level all the way up to the collegiate level about student-athlete safety. Kids kept dying. So one of the things I started to realize, why kids keep dying, what's the common denominator here? The emergency action plan. See, those of us that don't know what an emergency action plan is, show of hands, how many of us know what a fire drill is? Anybody? Okay, that's an emergency action plan. However, the potential, most of us in corporate America pre-COVID, we go from one building to the next, we stand outside, it's always a problem. Some of us ladies probably taking death selfies, right? You probably take a death selfie, and it's always a bad time for a fire drill, right? Like, oh man, I was just doing some online shopping or whatever the case may be, and then the bell rings and everybody goes across the street. We stand across the street and then we come back in. However, the potential for a fire every time you walk on the field can happen just like that. Every time you walk on the field, the potential for a fire can happen. So that common denominator that we realized that while these kids kept dying across the nation, a lot of times we don't hear about it because it's not in our geographical area. This is my business, so I hear about every death. I have a vast team, we have a national reach, so we hear about every single one. So what we realized was the common denominator in all these deaths was the emergency action plan. Either there wasn't one, or there was one and it wasn't practiced. It doesn't have anything. Regardless, let me tell you, you can have all the safety equipment on the field, but I guarantee you, if you ain't got no EAP, that's the foundation of the safety aspect of it. So with the EAP, we start looking at emergency plan assignments. So as your athletic trainer just told you, they'll be the ones that will attend to your child. Don't be afraid to talk to that lady if you see her and the other athletic trainer, Alicia. Please don't, family, because again, these are the people that's going to save your child. Any coaches in here? Show a hand. Are you a medical professional, sir?
No.
You medical professional? Who else was a coach? Did you guys go to medical school? See my point? Coaches are not medical professionals. But again, what usually happens when these deaths come is always the coach's fault. Because the coach pushed my kid too much. Or the coach did this. But a lot of times, family, what we got to realize, coaches aren't medical professionals. They can be just as educated as we are. The more educated that we all are, the safer all of our kids will be. Now, when we look at emergency action plan assignments, and I want you all to be very mindful of this, regardless of the age, if you're at the AAU level, if you're at the high school level, you are lucky because in the state of Pennsylvania, your school has to have an athletic trainer. That's state law. But keep in mind, a 5-minute meeting. How many, show of hands, how many people saw DeMar Hamlin's situation on Monday Night TV? Yeah, that went smooth. Unfortunately, in the real world, it doesn't. You know why I know? Because I talked to 6 families that following day that had to relive that nightmare all over again watching it on regular TV. That ain't always the case. So what you do is, see, and the thing is, in the NFL, they have resources. So basically what they can do, they can have those meetings that's maybe an hour in advance, and they can have an hour meeting. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Who's going to do that? But if you have a solid emergency action plan, guess what? You can have a meeting, a 5-minute meeting before every practice and every game. And I guarantee you, if you got a solid emergency action plan in place, you'll get the same results in regards to statistically a person recovering. So when you look at emergency field assignments, you already see, and we're giving handouts about this stuff as well. Who's going to call 911 and guide EMS to the field? If you got a team mom, how many team moms in the room? Got it, team mom. If we call a 911, we just can't say, hey, the kid fell, right? No, we have to be very, very intentional with our calls. There's a respiratory problem. If you gotta, as we say, put yeast on it and say, hey, he bleeding out the nose and he got a bone stuck through his arm. Because a lot of times when we call 911, more than likely, you're gonna get an EMTB there versus an EMT paramedic or advanced EMT. They can only stabilize. We need somebody that can go ahead and administer any type of medications, any type of, whatever they may need to get them to the hospital quickly. Okay, so who's gonna open the gate? A lot of times, family, this is things that we all take for granted, right? Because how many times we've been on the field and kids are playing, we don't even look at the gate. I guarantee you'll look at all this stuff differently now. You don't even look at the gate in the event of, because we don't have an in the event of mentality. I never had it. I just always assumed in the event of, they got it. And unfortunately, that's not the case. So the more information that we all know, the safer we'll be, because more than likely, when you look at emergency action plans, we have venue-specific emergency action plans. There's an emergency action plan for this building. The baseball field will have an emergency action plan. The swimming pool will have an emergency action plan. The basketball gym will have an emergency action plan. You may have a park with more than one field. If you call 911, what field you going to send them to? Or who's going to guide the person into field number 1 from the entrance, or field number 2, or field number 3? So a lot of times, emergency action plans are very venue specific. So who will contact the parent of the injured athlete? Somebody got to call. Because I guarantee you, it wasn't the people that were sitting at my kitchen table that recruited my son. It wasn't either one of them that called. It was a campus police officer. So I'm already in my feelings from that alone, because at the end of the day, Coach, you told me when you recruited my son, you were going to do what? You was going to take care of him. All right, now, who will ride in the ambulance if the parent or guardian of the athlete is not present? You better not send no kid. Who would be all right, show of hands, if they sent your kid to the hospital by themselves? Thank you. I know no hands will go up on that. Who will remain with the participants? Because a lot of times, keep this in mind, if something happens on the field, guess what? Things happen. They're going to happen. But that's just a part of sports. But if you have a well-tuned, practice emergency action plan, a lot of stuff will move smoothly or transition smoothly. Who will be in charge of crowd control? Because we all know something can happen and everybody gets emotional. I'll use the Mar Hamlin's case. Everybody saw that. We were all emotional. People crying, people this. That's just a part of sports. So a lot of times we need to focus on who's going to control the crowd. Everybody can't run to the injured person. Let the medical professionals handle what they need to handle in regards to that. And always do a walkthrough. That's the practice. The more practice we are, the more educated we are, the safer our kids will be. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, during the recruitment process, any show of hands, anybody got seniors in the room? Juniors? Got it. Okay, so you're in the recruitment process. Okay, cool. All right. We always ask them questions. I told you what I asked. Can he play? Can he get a spot on the team? And something else didn't even matter. So we need to be asking a couple more questions. Told you, we asked about playing time. I asked about mental health. I had no clue what an emergency action plan. Keep going, bro. Okay. These were good questions. However, before signing our children up to participate in any program, we must ensure that their safety is prioritized. One of the first questions we should ask any program director or coach if the team has and practices an EAP. That should be the stickler, that should be the takeaway that everybody walks away from in this room today. Do you have an EAP? And guess what? If they don't have an EAP, let's get them an EAP. That's all, because sometimes we just have to learn, we have to learn together. And that's really the primary concern of that. There's my baby boy there. He got his looks from his mom. Okay, can my child play? The question we should ask, we already went over, what equipment should be on the field. Now, keep this in mind. You may not have an Alicia at every one of these events. Luckily you do. You may, like I said, this is a mandated state where you have you have athletic trainers. But one athletic trainer for one big school, how far is that going to go? You can't expect her to be a superhero, and especially if they got an off-site game and you got a game over here. So again, we all have to be educated. And the more educated we are as parents, coaches, and student athletes, the safer we'll be. I told you all we donated our own we donated cold water tubs along the way. I finally got the bright idea because I kept seeing what the challenges were when it came to heat-related injuries, right? A lot of times you can have a tub on the field, but if you don't have a water source, it's like a swimming pool in the desert. It has no sense. It has no purpose. So one of the things that we did was a lot of the tubs, these big tubs that we were donating several years ago, I saw what the value was. The challenge was taking this tub everywhere with you. Unless you're putting it on the truck, so we created an inflatable tub that can go everywhere with you. So there should be no excuse not to have a tub with you, and also, worst case scenario, always keep it near a water source. All right. You with me? Okay. Now, what emergency equipment is available on site should my child need immediate attention? Immediate attention. Any program you sign your child up for to participate in should have some of the following. An AED machine. You got the Peyton Walker Foundation here. Guess what? Do not walk out of this room and not stop by their table. Because again, that emergency action plan or the safety equipment, this is what's going to save your life. Take my word for it. An AED machine, within 3 to 5 minutes, reach Walker practice game field and court. I'm gonna let them talk about that since this is their field of expertise. Cold water immersion equipment, cold water tub, cooler ice towels. One of the big things I emphasize to parents. How many of us stop our student athletes by 7-Eleven en route to practice? How many of us stop our kids by 7-Eleven en route to practice? Or some type of store to get a refreshment, Gatorade, water, and everything? Show hands. All right, cool, thank you for the crowd participation. Get a bag of ice next time. Just grab a bag of ice. I tell people all the time, worst thing can happen to a bag of ice, it'll melt. Best thing you can do is save a life. Remember that, always grab ice. First aid kits, wet ball globe thermometers. Anybody know what a wet ball globe thermometer is? Got it, okay, it's a couple people. So again, we discuss all these things. Yep, so clearly one of our tubs donated, clearly we can keep going on. I always like pictures. Are your coaches CPR certified and AD certified? Ask these questions. Always ask these questions because they should be. At least one person. Okay. Keep going, bro. Go back one more. At least one member of the coaching staff should be CPR first aid certified. However, again, coaches are not medical professionals. We can't put all the onus on them. The more educated we all are, the safer all of our student athletes will be. If the program your student athletes plays for has an athletic trainer, get to know them. Same thing I'm saying repetitively. Ask these questions and get to know that athletic trainer. Again, as I always say, can we read this on 3? 1, 2, 3.
The more educated we all are, the safer our student athletes will be.
I can't say it enough. Some families I work with, a couple of our clinics, parents, do your homework. Get as much information as possible before consenting your child to participate. Make sure your safety is a high priority. Young people, speak up for yourselves. Listen to your body. Parents, let's emphasize that. The reason I like this crowd, or the reason I like this demographic of people, because guess what? You're a bad financial manager. Where does it start? At home. You got some challenges. Where do they start? At home. We plant good seeds of self-advocacy, listening to your bodies. When your body tells you to stop, stop. Speak up for yourself. KOBY, that's our Kobe. It stands for Keep On Believing in Yourself. That's our self-advocacy campaign. So that's what we have, and that's what we're all about at the Jordan McNair Foundation. So, plant the seeds of self-advocacy in your young athletes so early that they know what to look for and can speak up for themselves when something isn't right. Young people, when you feel uncomfortable, don't talk back to your parents. Come on. Okay, and we added a couple things. I like this picture, so clearly family, stop by our table, grab a copy of Can My Child Play? We usually sell them for $2,500, but I'm selling them for $20 today, and I'm signing them. So technically, the other $1,000 is worth the signature. So good thing. But again, it's an excellent tool. And what I didn't cover today, basically, you can get out of the book. We are giving some handouts out. So basically, in regards to our handouts, we're giving you what an emergency action plan should look like, a template of an emergency action plan. 6 questions. I'm a takeaway guy. We focus on takeaways. 6 questions that you should be asking every coach, every school, because a lot of times this is how it looks. At the AAU level, you can talk to a coach. When you get to high school, they're going to start walking away from you. And I guarantee you, if they get to the collegiate level, beyond the recruitment table, you might not even get an opportunity to talk to a coach at all. So again, plant these seeds and not be afraid to really speak up when it comes to that.